Hey guys, welcome to BP the Bible Perspective, unpacking 10 questions to atheists. Now, before we unpack them, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. I want to be very ambitious and unpack 10 questions that were posed to atheists, or I should say, 10 questions that atheists decided to answer. And this was done through the Atheist Experience YouTube channel, and it was called 10 Questions Atheists Can't Answer and Then Easily Answer. In other words, these were the 10 questions that people asked them. They said that atheists can't answer these questions, but they said, and then the atheist response is, oh yes, they are easily answered. Now, the atheist experience was assembled several atheists, as you can see here, seven atheists that answered some of these questions. And I want to unpack their answers. Now, let me also preface by saying why I am doing this, because one, I'm a Christian. My faith is strong in Jesus. I find their arguments and I find their answers compelling. I find their answers intriguing. I find their thought process compelling. And I find their answers and their responses challenging. In other words, I find that they challenge me not to be an ignoramus, not just, well, why do you believe in God? Or why do you believe in Jesus? You give some stupid answers, right? But you can probably find a lot of Christians who give stupid answers. One of the reasons why Christians give stupid answers is because they exist within their bubble. They go to church every Sunday. I was just in a city, Hammond, Indiana, and I went down a certain boulevard that I thought was nice. And I like nice decorations. When I say decorations, like the streets and kind of the parkway in the middle of the street, and then street lanterns. I like that. So I was driving down this street in Hammond, Indiana, and I noticed within a span of a mile, about a mile, there was at least 11 different churches. 11, and when I say 11 different churches of different denominations. And then immediately I thought, I bet out of all of these 11 different churches of 11 different denominations, that neither of them know each other, which is a sad testament to then Christendom. So my point is, if I was a writer writing an article, I could theoretically then write one article, sell it to each 11, and make money off one, because the one doesn't know the other. And so Christians exist in their bubble. They're not equipped to deal with a challenging faith, or someone challenging their faith. And what we find is that the atheists experience that they are growing, right? And possibly because of social media. I see them more on social media because I listen to them. Now, for example, my wife would probably not find these channels, how the algorithm, which I'm learning more and more about, doesn't funnel their channels to my wife, because she doesn't listen to them. I do. And so yes, I get introduced more and more to the voices of atheists and atheism. And as I said, my thing is, I'm doing this because I find their arguments compelling, intriguing, and challenging. And let me also say that since I am coming up against atheists, and their answers to, and this is just kind of a chart. I'm going to have a lot of charts like this, either just whatever rendering. as they answer questions about the universe and evolution and God, that I'm coming from a person. I'm not an educated person. Now, I'm not being self-deprecating. I'm just being truthful. I listen to people. So when if people was to ask, well, why do you feel like you have the nerve, let's say, to respond to their answers? Um, like, for example, would I respond to a Neil deGrasse Tyson? Um, and when I say is yes, I would respond to him. However, let me make it clear. I'm not debating the science itself. I'm not debating what they're going to say about the application of science. I'm not, because I'm not a scientist. For example, if they say, well, we got a telescope that found a planet, 9 billion light years away, I can't dispute that. I can't dispute whatever they say about it because, one, I don't have a telescope to dispute it. In other words, if a person tells me, and within Christianity, I do know the Bible. So if you tell me that the Bible says this, well, I know the Bible. I can get the Bible out and say, well, where? Show me. I don't have that kind of access to scientific information. In other words, I haven't studied. So if I was sitting with Neil deGrasse Tyson, I wouldn't argue with him to go, well, your knowledge of, astrophysics, it's bad. That would be stupid of me because he's probably forgotten more knowledge than I could ever learn at this point, right? So I wouldn't argue with that. What I do push back on is sometimes the application. I think there's some application of science and there's some answers that they're not giving. I think there's some insertions to their answers, and I'm going to point that out. So that's why I'm approaching this as a person who listens, and then I'm going to ask questions. So this is a response to the response. In other words, I'm asking questions of questions that was asked to them. And yes, I'm asking, and I'm coming from a Christian perspective or a biblical perspective. Okay, a biblical perspective. And so with that, this is, I broke their video up into several sections. So, and for us the questions, I broke them up into the questions that they pose. Forrest Valkai, if I'm pronouncing his name correct, I don't know if this is his channel or not. We're going to hear from him the most. So we're going to start with his questions, and then let's see here. Let's go to his questions first. All right.
Do you really believe that science is the only answer to all of life's questions?
Very no, for several reasons. First of all, science is not some tome of knowledge that we go and refer to when we want to learn something. That's simply not how it works. Science is just a tool for learning more things about the universe. It's the way that we find out new stuff. It's the way that we explore and probe and learn about the universe around us. It's not just something that we just draw answers from. It's something that we build answers with. But in the spirit,
I actually think that's a very good answer. Okay. Like I say, I'm going to sort of challenge some of the conclusions, some of the insertions, but I think this is a very, very good answer.
that this question was asked, as science is this opposition to religion. Do I really think that there's a naturalistic explanation for every single thing? Sure, there absolutely is a naturalistic explanation for every single thing, but that doesn't mean that it's the answer to all life's questions. I don't think that there's a mathematical equation that's going to help you decide where you should go to university or whether or not you should have another kid or what you should eat for lunch today. That just doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of things that are just personal, subjective choices. But in terms of the big, important questions, the questions that people have been asking since people began being people, where are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Where does life begin and what happens after it ends? These big questions that plague our minds and stretch our brains all the time, those are things that science absolutely can and has already begun to answer quite well. We're fortunate enough to live in a time right now where we have at least half of most of those answers, and the ones that we don't have, we have half of the answer at least on those as well. So the more we learn, the more we'll be able to learn. And the best part about science is that whenever you answer a question, you gain 3 new questions to ask. So, of course, I don't think that science is the answer to all questions forever, but in terms of the ones that matter, absolutely yes.
I'm going to challenge, too, that when he said that they have all of the answers. Now, one of the things I found about this is, and admittedly so, in the context of this video, you cannot then give an exhaustive answer. Okay, I get that. But I do find a lot of their answers vague. And then they say, well, the vagueness of the answers then explain the answers themselves. Okay, so so with that, let's go to the second clip here, and this is going to give by Kelly Laughlin. Okay, and he's an atheist. And by the way, these are all atheists. They don't believe in God, but again, they're answering the questions that are posed to atheists.
If God doesn't exist, why do you care if people worship him?
Well, I do care because people who worship God, no matter what that God is, tend to want to put that God into the politics of the country in which they live. We're seeing that now in our country with this big wave of Christian nationalism. We're seeing it in India with the Hindutva. And these are the reasons that I think that we need to move away from people believing in religion and get people more educated to a secular way of life.
Now, I would say this. That's too vague. He mentions Christian nationalism, which is a good point, because Christian nationalism would seem to seek, for everybody to live by the 10 Commandments. And if you do that, if you say that everybody must live by the 10 Commandments, you're going to have to do away with the Constitution, because the very first commandments violate the Constitution of the United States. Okay, so that's good. But if you then say that people are going to get away from religion, and then he puts it in a vague term, and then just be atheist, then you have to show me what road atheists would go down. Later on, they're going to kind of deal with the morality questions, but not vague, but not specifically. It's still going to be vague. So, like, for example, if I do say, let's go back to the 10 Commandments, and then even if I was to say, okay, if you live by the 10 Commandments, and I don't subscribe to that, but let's say if you was to live by the 10 Commandments, how bad would that be? Now, of course, from a Christian nationalist standpoint, you got to go back and say, what God are they referring to? And obviously, the Christian God, certainly not Allah or Hindu, right? So, in other words, with God. So, the Christian nationalists have a big problem when it comes to the Constitution. Which God are you referring to? But even if I was to say that, in terms of the modern religions, right, of today, the modern religions of today, not of the past. Now, of the past, following those gods would be problematic, because they would say, hey, offer your children in your infants and children in fire at the sacrifice. But if we go back to now the modern religions of today, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and others, do they instruct you to do something bad? Now, let me say something about Islam, because I know the first thought may come, well, did you see 9/11? If you read the Quran, now there's nowhere in the Quran that it tells you those kind of actions. For example, Islam itself is divided over the very radical people, such as the hijackers of 9/11, the suicide bombers, and those who would kill in the name of Allah. There's issues that you can say within there. In other words, the original Quran itself, and just like with the Quran, you have the Quran, and then you have those who interpret the Quran. And when I say interpret, the writings of it, like the Hadith, but I don't want to get too far into that. But the idea is that if you're going to say let's do away with religion and say man has to then live off of what, and that would be my question. Man would have to live off of what? What ideology? Who forms the ideology? And I say this because this is going to be sort of the pattern. And that's why I say there's vagueness, but not very specific direction. Do away with religions, but then that means then we're going to follow atheism. Well, what is the ideology of atheism for man? Now, keep this in mind that, in my opinion, most of the atheists that you see here, they live within a Christian Judeo ideology. In other words, the Bible, the Constitution was formed, the nation was formed based upon Christian ideology. It wasn't formed on atheism, and it wasn't formed on Islam or Hinduism. So they enjoy the benefits of a Christian nation or a Christian ideology. All right, let's go to our next. I think it's J. Mike. And then this is the host of his question. Here we go.
Seriously, can nothing create something?
Well, setting aside how memey this is and how telling it is that the person hasn't actually engaged with very many atheists, I don't really know very many people that hold this position. I do know a lot of theists that hold this position, however.
Now, before he answers this question here, the reason why people ask the question, if you say there is no God, right? No God. I'm gonna let him explain himself. But if you say there is no God, then you have to, in a sense, start with this. Now, if you see my black screen, right? I think, wouldn't you be forced to say that nothing? That, in other words, at some point there was nothing, right? There was nothing. But let me go on. Let me finish his point.
Seriously, can nothing create something?
Well, setting aside how memey this is and how telling it is that the person hasn't actually engaged with very many atheists, I don't really know very many people that hold this position. I do know a lot of theists that hold this position, however, because a lot of them believe in creatio ex nihilo, right? They believe that God created something from nothing. He didn't have any working material. He didn't have Play-Doh. He had nothing. He had to just will it from nothing into existence.
Well, no, yeah, he created the substance. In other words, God himself created the substance. And that is the belief of God, that he is God, that he created. So in a sense, yes, we believe that God created everything from nothing because he's God. In other words, the starting point is God. God is the starting point. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. If you travel back through time and space, past the creation of the of humans, past the creation of Earth, past the creation of the universe, you travel back in time, you will run into God. You will run into God. And not only will you run into God, that you would run into the revelation of who God is. And I want to see if, let me mark this 32 here. This picture here is the picture of the universe. And again, no one is holding it, right? But this is what I want you to see. If this is the universe, look at the edges of the universe. And again, around, so there's, in other words, there's nothing around the universe, because remember, we do believe that it is expanding in every direction at the speed of light. But expanding to what? Okay, expanding to what? And let me see here. So that's why I want to bring that in here. Okay, think about this. It's expanding to what? So yes, if God, who exists outside of time and space, which means he would have to exist outside of the space-time universe, and then we believe he created the universe, he's outside of that universe creating it. He's outside, he exists outside of that. Which means as God, and then let's also start with the notion of the word God. And oftentimes people try to bring him down to the level of man, which he's not. The very nature of the name, the very title, God, means he transcends that. So like, if I was to tell you, hilariously, if I was to tell you about Superman, the name itself, Superman, if I did say, well, Superman can fly at the speed of light, Superman could bounce bullets off his chest, Superman, blah, 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 blah. Well, he's Superman. So his abilities as Superman in itself is not questioned, because first of all, let's start with the title. He's Superman. And so when we start with the title of God, he's God, first and foremost. So the fact that he can create, he creates from nothing because he's God. He creates the substance. He creates all things. All right, so let's go back.
Seriously, can nothing create something?
It from nothing into existence. So I'm very skeptical on that take to begin with, but you don't actually have to hold this view as an atheist. You could hold the view that the universe is infinite. There's just an infinite series of past events. Or you could hold a view that I'm very sympathetic to, which is that there's a necessary initial state. So theists want to say that God necessarily exists. When we ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing, typically a theist will say, well, God necessarily exists.
I don't know who is saying that. I'm saying I believe it because God declared it, not from a scientific or philosophical debate, but because God declared it. God says, I'm God, I created all of this. Now, he is saying then that if the universe exists, that everything in the universe exists, then you have to go back to the Big Bang. So what was before the Big Bang? Now here's where the gaps come in at for them. Because you go all the way back to the Big Bang, and remember you got the Big Bang started from what? And if it started from an explosion, what were the elements of the explosion and what caused the spark? So that would be the first thing, right? What caused the spark? So now the universe exploded, but again, it exploded within time and space, or creating time and space, in which he's saying, or am I understanding that he is saying always existed?
He has to exist. I don't see why that chess move isn't available to a naturalist or an atheist who can just say, well, the initial moment of time, t equals 0, t equals 1, is the beginning of the universe. It has to exist. There is no way that that couldn't have existed. And you shave off a lot of ontological baggage. You don't have to appeal to a divine realm. You don't have to appeal to angels or jinns or genies or demons. You don't have to pack any of that into your view to get
Not that anyone was. In other words, when he says the ontological demons, angels, and all that. No. We're talking about God. But we're also talking about talking about the beginning of time. In other words, and he's making a great leap here to say, let's eliminate nothing. And then say that the universe then started, and he's going to say, for sure without God. So we know that for sure, that God didn't do it. But however, then let's say any kind of equation you plug in here, that you then have to say that those elements were there from the beginning. What kind of scientific hypothesis do you have for saying that the elements themselves are eternal?
this way more parsimonious, simpler view that has a nice trade-off between the commitments that you hold to and the explanatory power that you get out of it. I see God as an idle wheel in that explanation, and you don't have to posit that something came from nothing, but rather you could say that something had to exist, that being the initial natural state of reality. There isn't anything prior to that, doesn't come from anything, doesn't come from nothing, it doesn't come from a God, and you can call yourself an atheist.
Well, again, how would it not come from nothing? Now, this is, again, my black screen, nothing. Now, of course, he's not saying nothing. He's saying something. In other words, an explosion happened. And I'm going to say that, again, so from nothing or from no kind of direction, no thought, that explosion then produces a universe, which ultimately produces a planet, right? Which ultimately produces a planet. And I find that objectionable in that that's the faith then, because you're saying that in that very beginning here of this expansion, of course, this picture, I think, is the expanse of the universe after 14 billion years, that it starts from the elements themselves. So his logic is that the elements themselves are eternal and existed. Why would it explode then? In other words, if the elements are just sitting there eons before, because you have to say that there have to be eons before. So if the elements themselves, then of course, does time exist before this explosion? And I'm not expecting answers. Of course they don't have them. But if you say at the moment of the Big Bang, so before that, the elements began, the elements existed. Then the elements, did they exist for all eternity? Going back, did time exist? So if you say time didn't exist, so it doesn't matter whether it's time or non-time. Going back eons in the past, these elements existed until something caused them to explode. Now remember, the regions beyond the universe, the known universe, right? Our universe, which is measurable at this point. They're saying it's measurable after 14 billion years of existence. Here is a measurable universe, which means something exists outside of the universe. Something exists outside of it. And if something exists outside of the universe, what is that? Okay, other universes. Now, again, I don't expect an answer from that, but the main thing is that the rationale is we know God didn't do it. That's for sure. We know God didn't create this, design this. We know for sure. So nothing did it. The irrationality of, well, this spark happened from existing eons in the past, that something now, boom, spark. So the elements, boom, eon, and then it created a order. See, all of this, what you're looking at is the billions of galaxies in synchronous orbit, order around the universe. And as I said, that ultimately produce a world, and we'll get back to that later. So the next question, Jimmy Jr. is going to, he is going to answer this question.
If you've never been to the ends of the earth, if you've never been to every planet, if you've never been to every part of the universe, how do you know that God doesn't exist?
I have no indication that I'm supposed to be looking for God on other planets or in other parts of the universe. To me, what this sounds like is...
Now, but you do go beyond the bounds of Earth. He's getting ready to say. I'm going to come out because I'm going to remember. He goes to the end of the universe here. I mean, this is the Big Bang explosion that caused everything. He agrees with this, right? So this is a nice kind of picture. You have the Big Bang, then you have the expansion of the universe that ultimately gets to man. This is just, again, a picture, just a picture. But when he says, why wouldn't he look? You are looking, my point is, you are looking beyond, you're looking beyond the earth, okay? You're looking beyond the earth.
If you've never been to the ends of the earth, if you've never been to every planet, if you've never been to every part of the universe, how do you know that God doesn't exist?
I have no indication that I'm supposed to be looking for God on other planets or in other parts of the universe. To me, what this sounds like is post hoc rationalism that just comes from a long timeline of new discoveries. Each time the universe expands, each time Christian scholars are proven wrong about what it is we're supposed to believe on this planet, we have to listen to religious sycophants and ideologues come up with new ways to determine where God may exist, where he may live, and where should we be looking. When in all actuality, there's no reason whatsoever, no precedent for us to be looking anywhere other than this very planet that we inhabit. No religious text, no religious teaching that I've ever come across tells me that I need to be looking anywhere. Not only does it not do that, but it doesn't tell me some of the basics of the most concept problems or understandings that we have today, whether it be science in general, medicine, exploration of the New World, many of the historic trends that have taken place, all completely baseless when it comes to religion. So I would start here, if I were looking for God, on planet Earth, and to my knowledge, we've found nothing yet.
Well, I mean, we haven't found your evolutionary, in my opinion, your evolutionary answers. And before science, remember, there was God on the earth. Before science, there were many gods on the earth. So when he says looking for God, now what he's talking about is proof. And of course, we're not going to get in. We don't have to necessarily get into the dynamics of that, but understand, Jesus did prove that. Moses did prove that. You just didn't believe it. And God did it according to his way. But if a man comes and raises a person from the dead who's been dead for 4 days, that was witnessed even by his enemies. Okay, that he did prove it. But again, as I said, your atheistic view does go beyond the earth. You are looking for answers in the universe, in the Big Bang. All right, guys, I'm going to pick it up with part 2 because I want to spend some time on that part, on the 5th answers. So I'll pick it up in the next video. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in part 2.